Years ago, my family and I rented a waterfront cabin on Lake Wenatchee in Washington. The house had 4 bedrooms in total, but it was kind of a funky layout. 3 of the rooms and a half bath were downstairs, and the kitchen, dining room, and master were on the main floor. The master bedroom was where my girlfriend and I stayed because we paid for it. Then my dad, my stepmom, and my little brother were all downstairs. Both levels of the house faced the lake. On the main floor, there was a large deck that you could walk out to from the dining room or the living room through sliding glass doors. Downstairs, there was an equally large concrete patio with a hot tub and a barbecue. Then off of that patio, there was a small set of stairs that led right onto a dock on the water. We were there in June, but had a little bad luck with the weather, and it was overcast the whole time. It wasn't raining, but we didn't see any clear skies. On our first night there, we cooked a big dinner together, and my stepmom made strawberry daiquiris. Everyone ended up in and around the hot tub later that night, and there was a lot of laughing and relaxing. My dad and stepmom went to bed around 11 o'clock, and not long after that, my brother went in too. My girlfriend and I decided to stay out a little longer and go down to the dock, so we grabbed a blanket and one more daiquiri and walked down to spend some quiet time together before going to bed. Even though we couldn't see the stars like we'd hoped, it was nice to hear the lake, and I think the clouds kept some of the heat in because it wasn't that cold. We had been laughing about something when my girlfriend said she kept seeing color in the clouds. I hadn't seen anything, so we got on our backs to look up, and she was right. There was a small but noticeable purple-colored light moving around in between the layers of the clouds. There wasn't any flashing like a plane's lights, and I would call it more of a glow than a solid light. The clouds were pretty thick with no clear sky visible, and that really made it look like this glowing was inside the cloud layer. I had to assume it was a small plane, but we couldn't hear anything, and it looked like it was just moving around with no real path. We watched it loop over the lake and change directions more than once, so it really wasn't moving in the way a plane would. It was also around midnight and overcast, so not really an ideal time to be flying around for fun. This went on for a little while, and we saw it make multiple rounds over the lake. Then on one of the passes, it just kept going north and flew away. Of course, we thought this was a little out of the ordinary, but it wasn't enough to make us get up or do anything. We ended up staying on the dock and finishing our drinks, then came back inside around 12:30 a.m. Before going to bed, we both took quick showers to get the chlorine off from the hot tub. I went first, and when I was done, my girlfriend got in, and I walked out to do a quick look around and lock everything up. When I was checking the sliding glass doors on the main level, I noticed there were still empty cups and a couple of plates out on the patio table, so I walked out to grab them. As I was standing on the deck with my head down and dishes in my hands, I remember seeing every cedar board getting brighter with this intense purple color. It looked like nightclub lighting with that deep, almost black light color. The entire deck was glowing within a second or two, and I really didn't even have time to react to it. All I know is that I looked up out of reflex, and when I did, the only thing I could see was bright purple light glowing right above the house. There was no shape or outline of anything. I could only see this color, and it wasn't very high up. At that same time, I started to feel something on my skin. Since I had just gotten out of the shower, the only thing I had on was a small pair of shorts, so my whole upper body, legs, and feet were completely exposed. It was this cool sensation all over my skin, but especially on my shoulders, back, and arms. Then I remember looking down at my own arms and realizing what it was. There was a fine mist falling straight down around me, and the purple light was illuminating it. I could actually see it falling through the air and landing on my skin. That was what I was feeling. The instant I saw this happening, something in me went into panic mode. I got that overwhelming feeling that something was very wrong. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I didn't want this mist on my skin. I dropped everything I was holding, the cups and the plates, all of it. One of the plates even shattered on the deck right at my feet. Then I ran into the house at full speed and absolutely crushed my toe into the sliding door track on my way back in, and doing that dropped me to the ground. I limped back to the bedroom where my girlfriend had just gotten out of the shower and started shouting at her about what was outside. I'm sure I looked crazy and was barely making sense because I was on the floor rocking back and forth in pain, but I told her to get my dad and my brother, which she did immediately. By the time my dad got upstairs, I was making my way back out to the living room. I told him what I had seen, and he and my brother went out to the deck, but frustratingly, it was completely dark by the time they got out there. No one else saw what I did, and on top of that, I was laid out on the couch with what had to be a broken toe. Everyone was wide awake after this, and while I sat with ice on my toe, I went over every bit of the story. What was amazing is that nobody doubted me. My dad must have gone back outside with my brother a dozen more times because he knew I wasn't making this up. My girlfriend and my stepmom also believed me completely. I don't think anyone got back to sleep until about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I barely slept at all. The pain I was in was a big part of that, but I was also freaking myself about this mist I was in. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had stood in it with almost no clothing on for probably 30 seconds between first seeing the light on the deck and running back inside, and it had been falling on my skin the whole time. I knew that it had gotten on every part of me, not to mention I had been breathing it in too. The next morning, I was the first one up and my toe was throbbing. After limping into the kitchen to make coffee, I saw the shattered plates still out on the deck, and it was a stark reminder that everything had been real. I went out to clean it up and everything seemed perfectly normal. Nothing was wet or had any kind of residue on it, and the lake and the woods were just quiet. When everyone else got up, it was all we talked about over breakfast. My dad was pushing the idea that I'd gotten in the middle of a small plane illegally dropping chemicals over the lake at night or something weird like that, but I think we all knew that wasn't it. There was something producing the purple light in the mist, and it wasn't flying over us or dropping chemicals. It was sitting still straight above the cabin, and I think it was the same thing we had seen earlier from the dock. The thought of this being an alien encounter makes my skin crawl, because if that's true, I don't even want to know what was falling on me and covering my skin. The good news, though, is that I've never had any adverse effects from it that I'm aware of. I'm really glad about that because it was a heavy mist and it felt like standing near a waterfall. We didn't cut our trip short and stayed the 2 additional nights we had booked, but I can't say it was the trip we had planned on having. I was basically crippled for the rest of the weekend, which after we got home, I did find out I had broken my toe. And while it was such a nice cabin in the most beautiful area, there was just a creepy feeling that hung around with us for the rest of the trip. This is my story of an unforgettable encounter I had in Grand Lake, Colorado on June 14, 2016. I've only recently been driven to share it because of a YouTube video I saw about a case from 1984, and what was described in that video is almost identical to what I and 3 other people with me had seen. That summer, I had driven my roommate, my girlfriend, and her friend to Grand Lake from Boulder for a camping trip. All 4 of us were 20 years old at the time, and I had suggested Grand Lake because it wasn't too far away. Plus, I was somewhat familiar with the area and had spent some time there when I was younger. We drove up through Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park and ended up camping at what is now known as the Green Ridge Campground. One thing I want to mention is that back in 2016, this area was heavily wooded, but wildfires wiped out a massive amount of trees in 2020, so it no longer looks like it did when we were there. That evening, sometime after 10 o'clock, we were restless and wanted to explore, so we walked down a dirt road from our campsite to the area where Shadow Mountain Lake drains into the headwaters of the Colorado River. When we got there, we had to walk down a moderate hill to get to where the river starts. None of us had a flashlight, so we were taking it slow, but the moon had just been bright enough to walk around that night, and you could see it reflecting on the water, especially when you looked downstream. I remember that very specifically, actually. Once we got to the water, we started to wander downstream, not really on any trail, just following the river and enjoying being in the woods. The next thing I remember was seeing someone on the other side of the river. That section of the Colorado is not very wide, so we could easily see this person. To me, it looked like someone tall wearing a headlamp and moving downstream in the same direction we were. The light from the headlamp was also extremely bright and had a very clean look, if that makes any sense. I also want to say that no actual person or figure was visible. All we could see from our side of the river was the light, but it looked like a person with a bright headlamp on their head, and we figured someone else was out doing the same thing we were. We only saw this person walking downstream for a minute. Then I don't know if they heard us or saw us or what, but they stopped. Then the light turned in our direction like they were staring at us. My roommate, who had had a few beers, started yelling out in a friendly way and saying something like, "Hey buddy," while waving his arm. The light just stayed there though, and we didn't get a response. I don't remember how long we stood there waiting to hear something or see the light turn away, but it was long enough to start feeling uncomfortable. Eventually, it did turn back toward the trail and started moving downstream again, but this is where everything started to get extremely strange. As this light continued downstream, we noticed it was moving in a perfectly steady and fluid way, like it was floating. It wasn't bobbing up and down or being jerky like you'd expect from a headlamp on someone's head, especially if they were walking across rough terrain in the dark. While we were standing on our side and starting to question what this actually was, the light went out and that side of the river went dark. I have to admit, all four of us thought this was creepy. If it was a person and they shut their light off like that right after staring at us, were they trying to watch or get to us without being seen? And on the other hand, if it wasn't a person, what else could this floating ball of light be? Seeing the light go out really put us on edge, and we were talking about walking back to the campground. Before we could even decide what to do, we saw the light again, and when we did, I was startled by my girlfriend saying, "Oh my God." What she had reacted to was that the light had moved to our side of the river. First off, there was still no shape or outline or silhouette of anyone. It was only the light. Secondly, there was no crossing anywhere on that part of the river other than the dam or spillway far behind us, and this is something I later checked with Google Maps. There is no way any person could have gotten to the other side that quickly. It might be possible to wade through certain parts of it in the daytime, but it would be slow and dangerous. Doing it at night and in a matter of seconds was impossible, and that was when we knew this wasn't a person. No one had to say anything. We all started quickly walking back up the incline toward the dirt road that goes back to the campground. When we were about halfway up, we could still see the light, and it actually seemed to be gaining on us. My roommate started belligerently screaming obscenities at it, probably in an effort to scare it away, but that did nothing. It never stopped smoothly coming up the hill and following us. By the time we hit the top of the hill where the dirt road was, we were terrified, and all four of us burst into a sprint. I have always been a gifted runner and had been running competitively for years, so I ended up way ahead of everyone else. When I finally looked back and saw how far behind everyone else was, I stopped to wait for them. The girls got to me first, then my roommate was right behind them, and I was just waiting to see this light come over the crest of the hill behind him. That never happened though. By the time they got past me, I didn't see anything else coming down the road. Also, no one waited for me, they all just kept running past into the campground. Once we were back at our campsite, my girlfriend and her friend pulled their sleeping bags out of the tents and made a double bed in the car for themselves. Neither one of them wanted to sleep outside. My roommate went from being in a fun, half-drunk mood to completely serious and even a little paranoid. He was carrying around a hatchet for the rest of the night, thinking that what we saw was alien technology and it was going to come back. It's funny because back then we acted like we were strong, brave 20-year-old men, but my roommate and I ended up sleeping in the same tent together. The day after this, we were getting ready to drive back to Boulder and had a quick conversation with the group camping next to us. We gave them a short version of what we had seen and found out that they had a story from the night before too. Two of the guys had gone off to find firewood about an hour before we took our walk, and apparently they saw something similar. They didn't go nearly as far as we had gone, but they had gone far enough to see the river. I guess when they were at the top of that same hill, they saw a group of small bright lights falling into the trees on the other side of the river. The guy I talked to said it looked like someone shooting off Roman candles in the woods, but without the loud pops. After talking to them, we left to go home, but had even more questions about what had happened. I was really surprised that we weren't the only ones to see something. This experience created a bond between the four of us, and we're all still friends. My old roommate has never stopped believing it was advanced technology, but I'm open to just about any explanation. In my opinion, it could have very well been extraterrestrial. I'd also say it could have been paranormal or supernatural. What I wouldn't say though is that it was a person or really anything man-made because of the way it moved and crossed the river. You really would have had to see it for yourself to understand how unnatural it was. I was on a 2-week construction project at the Kitt Peak National Observatory southwest of Tucson. We were one small part of a larger restoration effort after the Contreras fire. I'm not going to say the name of the company I work for or exactly what we do for privacy reasons, but there wasn't anything secret about the job itself. It was the normal work we always do. Kitt Peak is very secluded and at least an hour from anything. The location feels like the dictionary definition of the middle of nowhere. When you get there, you can see big white domes and other smaller buildings scattered around the peak, but when you look around, there is nothing but desert in every direction. Our crew would drive up early in the morning, then work all day and head back to Tucson in the evening. Also, the observatory was closed to the public when we were there, so we never saw anything going on as far as events or tourists. Everyone up there had a reason to be there, which is important to the story. This happened the evening before we were scheduled to finish our job. Most of our crew had left in one truck, which left me and another guy to drive the other 2 trucks back. After he left, it was just me. All I needed to do was load tools, so I was only going to be 10 minutes behind him. I was at my truck in one of the larger parking lots right near a big open spot with markings for where I'm guessing a helicopter can land. It was close to sunset and I was ready to get going so I wouldn't be too late getting home. I didn't see any other workers or staff around me and there were no other vehicles. While I was standing at the back of the truck, I saw someone walking toward me from across the parking lot. I assumed it was someone that worked there, but as they got closer, I could tell it was a man and he didn't look like he should be there. I'm only 5'8", so it was easy for me to tell he was over 6 feet tall and very narrow. The most noticeable thing about him, though, was his clothing. He had on dark pants that looked like they were wool and an overcoat, and he was wearing a hat that was like the hats men wore in the 1930s. He really looked like he walked straight out of the past in an almost mafia-style outfit. I stopped what I was doing and waited for him to say something. I remember being nervous since I didn't know who he was or what he wanted, and I had a feeling he was going to complain about something. The first thing that came out of my mouth was, "Can I help you?" because I didn't know what else to say. He stood right in front of me and asked something about being done for the day, and I let him know I was just leaving. I also noticed his sharp facial features while he was talking, and he had high, prominent cheekbones. His face almost looked like someone who might be underweight or malnourished, where you can see more of their bone structure. He was polite, but it was still awkward. Then he went into a few normal questions, like if I had ever been to the observatory before that job and if I was from Tucson. We briefly talked about the wildfire too, because I told him what our company was doing, and I was starting to think he had to be an observatory staff member. Then, without any segue at all, he changed the subject. He told me that we should be very careful with the information and the signals we're sending out into space. This really caught me off guard, and he said it like I had something to do with what the observatory does. He then told me that we shouldn't be drawing so much attention to ourselves. After reminding him I was only there for other work and I didn't know anything about the observatory, he acknowledged that but didn't seem to care. I was getting mixed signals from the guy, so I finally asked who he was, and the only thing he said was that he was a volunteer. I didn't get his name or any other information. That was also when his mood shifted. He didn't raise his voice or act aggressive, he just got more intense and serious, and the conversation went into a weird place. He told me that it was fine for us to be looking for life with telescopes and equipment, but that's all we should be doing. According to him, there's life everywhere, but only some of it is good, and he warned me that if we keep drawing attention to ourselves, sooner or later we're going to attract the hostile ones. How do you even respond to a guy telling you things like this? I didn't know if he was a scientist or a lunatic. Luckily, he was the one that ended the conversation and kind of quickly said he had to go. That's when I got into my truck and started it. Before I shut the door, he added one last thing, and I can remember it exactly. He looked right at me and said, "The smart ones stay quiet." I really didn't know what he was talking about. The way he said it made it sound like he was talking about humanity as something separate from himself. Then he threw up a hand like a weak wave goodbye and started walking toward the road that goes into the observatory. As I was driving out of the parking lot, I saw him still walking, but I never saw him enter a building or even a gate. I don't know if that means anything, it was just something I noticed. I was really glad to be in the truck and driving because it had been the strangest 10 minutes of my life. The next day, my company finished up our job without any issues. I was wondering if I would see that guy walking around again, but we really didn't see anyone that last day. We just finished our work and went home. I later told my boss about this encounter and how uncomfortable it had been, and he thought it was just as weird as I did. I was also curious if he knew of any other employees or volunteers that could have been hanging around, but he had no idea what their staff situation was that day. I still don't understand how or why he seemed to come out of nowhere just to lecture me and give me this crazy warning as if I'm able to do anything about it. I mean, signals and information are being sent out all over the world every day. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe he didn't work there and wanted me to relay the message to the observatory. It was definitely the most unreal experience I've ever had with one of the strangest people I've ever met, and for it to have happened at a place like that makes it even more strange. I guess in a small way, I am getting his message out by telling the story. I want to thank everyone for watching another episode of Skywatcher Stories. If you like hearing these personal experiences of strange sightings and alien encounters, please subscribe because I upload new episodes every week and it really helps the channel. Until next time, keep watching the skies.